everyone. On this wintry, wonderful wintry day, ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of our gathering this afternoon is to publicly recognize a colleague, an advocate, and a friend. And today is Robert Leverty Day. Our program this afternoon will include correspondence from those unable to attend today, and everyone present will have an opportunity following this tribute to speak personally with our honored guest. And at Heritage Community Church, folks, we welcome applause. I'm just waiting for our friend Brian Charles. He's coming quite a distance, but we will have a land acknowledgement when he comes in. And I have my dear sister Sylvia. I'm going to ask if she'd like to come forward and present a Black Heritage recognition.
To Mr. Leverty, our special guests, and our friends. When Carolyn first asked me to do a Black Heritage recognition, I thought, oh, where do I start? But I think we start here with us today. When we came through those doors, we just took for granted that this would be a place of acceptance, of security, and of hospitality. There was a time when doing this was not a possibility. There was a time when doing this was against the law. There was a time when doing this was a death sentence. So when we were, as a congregation, were planning on naming this building, we didn't want to just be recognized by our denomination. We wanted to be recognized as a congregation that welcomed community because we celebrated our differences. And so we honor our ancestors. Gonna wait, I think somebody's coming in. Dawn's coming up. So we respect our indigenous ancestors who, with open arms, greeted us on their lands with friendship and hospitality. We recognize our ancestors who, by their own choice or by circumstances, came here to avoid famine, starvation, poverty, oppression, displacement, persecution, and war. And we acknowledge our African ancestors who did not choose to leave their homeland, but instead were shipped to other countries for profit. They became an enslaved people. They became property, but they became freedom seekers, and they became heroes. They became educators, lawyers, newspaper editors. They became landowners. They became anti-slavery abolitionists. They became civil rights leaders, and they became martyrs. They became the protesters, the freedom train riders, and the voice for social justice. They became registered voters. They became elected officials. They became members of parliament. And they became global coalition allies. They became the little neighborhoods in those little settlements, in those little towns. And they became the door that we walk through today so we could do this. And we need to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I also see our friend Brian Charles is here. I'll give him a moment as I come in. But we're going to ask Brian Charles to come forward and offer a land acknowledgement at this time. Thank you for traveling the distance.
Anishnabinine, Gitash Nodin, Indigenous Cause, Muskanoje, Indodem. For those of you who have not yet completed your Ojibwe 101 language course, you can call me Brian. That's totally okay. On behalf of Sheffield Park Black History and Cultural Museum, a land acknowledgement statement. Sheffield Park Black History and Cultural Museum acknowledge that the Indigenous peoples have been present in this region since time immemorial. Today, Treaty 18 covers the territory of southern Georgian Bay, where the museum is located. This region is the traditional territory of the Chippewa Tri-Council, which includes Beausoleil First Nation, the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and the Chippewas of Rama First Nation. The Chippewa Tri-Council continues to this day to uphold their culturally based responsibility of maintaining stewardship of these lands. In historical times, the Petun, Wendat, Iroquois, and Mississauga have also had a presence in this region. We acknowledge the removals of the original people from this land, the erasure of their stories by the colonial governments of Britain, Upper Canada, and Canada. Sheffield Park Black History and Cultural Museum commits to welcoming all visitors to the site and facilitating an opportunity to learn the true history of this region, these lands, and the people who leave their footprints behind for future generations to follow. Welcome to the territory.
Thanks. In putting our program together, I knew we just couldn't do it all by ourselves. We've invited Andrea Wilson, maybe relationship we might not know, you will see, to offer an official welcome today. Andrea, thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. And good afternoon, everyone, on this beautiful white snowy day that excites some of us, not all of us. And as Sylvia said, my name's Andrea Wilson, and I'm the curator of the Craigleith Heritage Depot, and it's the railway station down on Highway 26. And Carolyn has asked me to share with you a few housekeeping notes. I'm the safety officer here today. So before we start, we have 3 emergency exits, and I'll try to do that like I'm on an airplane. The one in front of you is obviously one we can use. There are 2 at the back, one on the one side. And there's a muster station across the street if you need it, in the snow and the slush. Washrooms are located in the foyer to the right as you exit from the center stairs. So with that security task completed, I wish to warmly welcome all of you today. On a frosty day, you've all made it here, and that pays tribute to Rob, and that's why we're here. We're here to give thanks to our honored guest, Rob Leverty, as he retires from the Ontario Historical Society. We're just so used to having you there, Rob. It's messing with our heads a little bit. But we're really delighted to have each and every one of you with us this afternoon to really celebrate Rob's transition from what will likely be his busiest time in his life. I also wish to thank Carolyn and Sylvia Wilson, the Sheffield Park Black History and Cultural Museum, and the Heritage Community Church for actually hosting and bringing us all here together today and getting the word out. So thank you very much for that. And they've also provided really one of the most wonderful places to share and have fellowship here today. And that is unbelievably wonderful. So thank you for that. But for each of you, we want to welcome you and thank you for coming to the town of Collingwood from near and far. There's no, extra points for that, but we really appreciate it. Well, maybe for you. to share in this special occasion, and your presence here demonstrates the value of Rob's work over the years for advocating and supporting Ontario's rich natural, cultural history and heritage. Rob's gift of insight, knowledge, and time to our grassroots heritage communities really does go above and beyond his work at the Ontario Historical Society. I know he has given the Craigleith Heritage Depot his time personally to one of our projects, award-winning projects too, and I'm sure it's because you were involved. And he's done that with so many other people as well, and so many other organizations. And so we're really excited for you, Rob, as you head off on your new next adventure. And today, we're really welcoming friends, neighbors, colleagues, peers, Ontario Historical Society members, cultural workers, advocates, artists, educators, dignitaries, and family, because we really are a heritage and cultural family. And really, we're a dynamic, beautiful group of people. And I'm really glad that you're here to help us applaud Rob for his retirement from the Ontario Historical Society. And together we all send you the best for your next steps. And thank you for all your work.
Well, keeping on going, it is my privilege to introduce Mayor-elect Yvonne Hamlin. Yvonne Hamlin took office as mayor of the town of Collingwood on November 15th, 2022. She has served her community as a town councillor since 2018, chair of the Development and Operations Committee, and vice chair of the Regional Physician Recruitment Committee. We've been busy. Yvonne has been a long time volunteer in numerous community-based organizations. She's been determined in her efforts to connect residents, community organizations, business, and local government throughout southern Georgian Bay. Yvonne believes in collaborative solutions to economic, social, and environmental challenges in our area. She was a presenter in the inaugural Collingwood World Summit Habitat in Townsend 2020 on the topic of building back better, different impacts of COVID-19 on recovery, town development, and sustainability. And prior to being elected, Yvonne practiced as a senior lawyer in municipal law for 27 years and chaired the Canadian Property Tax Association. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Yvonne Hamlin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to bring greetings from the town of Collingwood and our council, new and old. In fact, on Tuesday, I will assume the mantle of office, although I can assure you that since the election, it has been hanging heavy on my shoulders every day. Some days heavier than others, but we won't go in there right now. This is a nice Sunday afternoon. As you know, our town in 1855 had the railway arrive, and I was, as you may know also, at that time the town was described as nothing more than a clearing in the woods with some scattered houses and shops. And now, of course, it's more than 150 years later. Our full-time population is around 26,000, and we have another 4,000 people with part-time housing here. And then we're going to have lots of growth coming, so we're told. And lots of growth maybe we don't even want, but we're told we got a plan for it. So we're getting more growth even. And so what I wanted to say is as we move forward into, our next phase of great growth here in Collingwood, we have to make sure we take the time to recognize and appreciate the importance of preserving and of acknowledging our past. Mr. Leverty, we know that you care deeply about this place that we call home, and your stewardship has helped and continues to help preserve our history, our environment, our escarpment, and our future. And thank you for that service, and I know that you're going to continue to be involved in that. Your leadership reminds us what our priorities must always include. So thank you so much for your service as an executive director to the Ontario Historical Society, and best wishes for the next phase of your journey.
Thank you. Mr. Leverty, our Member of Parliament, Terry Dowdall, sends his regrets. He was summoned to Ottawa today on this day for a meeting, but he sends well wishes upon your retirement. And it's also an honor for me to introduce our next guest, a friend and community advocate who has spent a lifetime of service for others, none other than the Honorable Jean Augustine. 1993, Jean Augustine made history as she became the first African-Canadian woman elected to Canada's House of Commons. She served as Member of Parliament for the Toronto riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore for 4 consecutive elections, and was later appointed to Cabinet in 2002, served as Secretary to the Prime Minister, Secretary for Multiculturalism, and Chair of the Status of Women at the National Caucus level. The Government of Canada asked Jean to lead the commemoration of the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the British slave trade, and later appointed first Fairness Commissioner, which she held for several years. Recognition includes the Order of Canada, Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, and Commissioner of the Order of the British Empire, along with school names and centers named in her honor, and presented with the keys to the city. That's pretty good. I'm going to assign you some homework. If you look at Miss Augustine's name, there's several initials. So our homework assignment is to research the meaning of those initials after her name. In closing, we are not only grateful for your role in designating February as Black History Month and the 100th Accomplished Black Canadian Women organization, but also for the joy and inspiration you emulate in our midst. We look forward to your remarks and participation in this program. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, I want to correct a few things.
The teacher in you.
The teacher in me says, and it's important that that we get the history, and I'm sure that we need to get the history right. I was Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister of Canada. I was the Minister of State and for Multiculturalism and the Status of Women in Canada, and etc. So I'm not too sure where that those notes came from, Carolyn, but we need to correct them for history's sake. I was born in Grenada. Anybody here know where Grenada is? I usually say the prettiest, the best island in the Caribbean.
Yes.
And I can say that in here because there aren't other islanders who might throw things at me. And I came to Canada in 1960. I came to Canada on what was called at the time the Canada Caribbean Domestic Scheme. Prior to that, the government of Canada was very much engaged with the Caribbean, building schools and assisting in several different ways, coming out of the Marshall Plan and all the stuff that happened after the war. But we got to the place where we were now talking not only in terms of how we can engage ourselves in multinational settings, but how we can engage one-on-one with the islands and the Caribbean. And so the whole notion of how can we as Canadians, how can you as Canadians assist the islands, especially in terms of the young people. And the story then is almost a story today, the employment of young people, finding opportunities for young people. And somehow, some smart person somewhere, I would imagine it may have been Bob Leverty, but said, how about if we get young people to come to Canada and work in the homes of Canadian families for 1 year, give them landed immigrant status, then they can remain in Canada and find employment. So of course, I jumped at that opportunity and I came. I worked with a Canadian family for 1 year, looking after their young son. And then I went on to Teachers College. And then I went on to work with the Catholic School Board. And then I was a teacher. And then I was a resource teacher. And then I was a principal. And then I was a supervisory officer. And then I got appointed by Pierre Elliott Trudeau to several different boards. And like the Board of Harbourfront. Then I got some community push towards other boards like the Hospital for Sick Children, etc., and on and on. And I'm saying all of this to talk about the fact, and I say this when I talk to young people, you just don't get there from here or here from there. When we listen to the mayor's bio, that somehow or the other, that participation, collaboration, working with community, moving oneself up from one sphere of endeavor to the next. When I came to Toronto in 1960, Toronto was a different place. At the time, Canada, I should say, was a different place. We had no Charter of Rights and Freedom. That didn't come till 1982, when we brought our Constitution over and amended it with the Charter of Rights and Freedom. We had no human rights code as we know it today. So when there was racism and discrimination and told that one cannot employ you, you had no place to go to complain and no agency who would take your complaints. We had no police community relations. Actually, what we had was a police force where weight and height requirements to become a policeman. We had no school boards talking with parents or trustees getting in there with parents to make sure that the education system was responding to the needs of the growing population of people that were coming from developing countries and from the Caribbean in particular. We had no landlord and tenant act so that the landlord could say to me, it's for rent, yes, the sign is there, it's for rent, but we don't rent to your people.
Yes.
And you had no recourse. You had no place to go with this. And so you stood, you marched, you protested. In the 60s, we used to have what I call demonstration, or what the French would say manifestation. We would have these things just about every weekend. You marched and you wrote letters. We did not have social media to organize people. We had telephone trees. I said that the other day, somebody said, what is a telephone tree? And I said, I have to explain to you what a telephone tree is. We had telephone trees to get the message out. We had to organize. We had to write papers, white paper, green paper, yellow papers, to the government and to the legislators. We had to make sure that we knew who we were electing so that we could find those individuals and make sure that our voices were heard. We had to go to the corporate bodies like the CBC and others to say, there is no one who looked like me or looked like us reading the news or on the news or telling our stories. And we had to find the allies, people in the community who believed in justice and fairness and equity. Right now, we're in a world where we're talking all the time about diversity and inclusion. But we were far from even the recognition of diversity. I think all of us now would know that we don't have to make the case for diversity because diversity is right before us. You go any place and you look around, you can see the diverse faces, diverse people. But it's the issue of inclusion that is so important. And the issue of allies. Allies. And this brings me to the guest today, the one we're honoring today, the one we're saying, well done. You've done a good job. You've helped to move the story forward. You are an ally. And so I'm here because I saw Rob as an ally, and the work that he's been doing over the years and that the Historical Society have been doing over the years is to make sure that that society is more fair, more just, more equitable, and that we're all included. The issue of inclusion. Finding where we are, whether it's through cemeteries, or whether it is through mapping, or whether it's through research, but finding and getting that information and bringing it to all of us so that we could understand. There's the old saying, you have to know where you're coming from to know where you're heading.
True.
And so what the society, what OHS has done is doing the documentations and getting and giving it to us in today's language, today's world, today's media, today's platforms, so that my grandchildren could begin to understand where they're coming from, where we're coming from as a society, what has been important, what is important, and what will continue to be important as we work towards this fair and just and equitable society. The issue of inclusion of women, the issue of everyone in the society regardless of gender, regardless of how they identify. All of those recognitions, those are things that as a society we're working towards. And before I step down, I think it's important for us to say that it is the Rob Levertys of this world who are in positions, who have taken their positions seriously, who are willing to work with all of us in the community to make sure that our voices are heard, to make sure that we give the documentation that is important and necessary as we build, so that we as Canadians, we as Ontarians can understand each other. And we stand heads up. You go to any part of the world and you ask what is happening in terms of the history, in terms of the knowledge. And of course, in some European countries, because they've had a history of kind of putting things together, because they have monuments that stand to whatever, because their education system is such. But we stand as Ontario. We stand really tall when we could pull out the documentation from the Ontario Historical Society and from all of you who are doing the work in your different spheres of endeavor, where we're building that knowledge base, those important things that we as a society should know, should support and should have our young people so that they too can transcribe that into their platforms that they're using right now. Some of it I don't know very much about. You know, the Twitter and what else? The Facebook and the Instagram and the TikTok and on and on and on. I'm 85 years old, and I got something from someone the other day, and she said, well, we made our suggestions in black, and Teresa made hers in green. Could you make your amendments in red? And I said, what? How do you do that? How do you do that? And as we work towards this paperless world, that our young people have to understand. And this is what you're doing and what you have been really pushing, Rob, with your staff and with the organization so that things could be understandable, not only for those of us. So history is not something in the past and then that's it, but it's current knowledge, current learnings that come from that historical base. And so Rob, we'll miss you. You've always been friendly. You've always been with a great big smile, yet you have been a true professional and someone who has brought us thus far in terms of the documentation, in terms of leadership in an organization that it's crucial for us to see continue to grow, to live, to do the work, to find the allies, to get people who would get out there with hose in the ground and paper in hand and do the research and bring it to us. So we'll miss you, but we know you're not far. They say the word retire does not speak to the fact that you're tired. We're hoping that we'll see you again and that you'll be part of the movement ahead, simply because challenges come up all the time. That each time you think you've broken some ground, something else comes up. And as the political waves and as policy agendas change, we need your voice, and we need the voice of Ontario Historical Society to keep us all together, because really what we're all working towards is a society where, and the pastor this morning spoke so well about this, where we're all kind of, as human beings, we all are respectful towards each other. We all recognize each other's history. We all recognize the fact that if we are to grow and we are to stand tall in the world, that we must be fair, we must be just, we must be equal, treat each other in such a way, and we must be inclusive, that is, make way for each other and make way for each other's programs to be recognized. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here, my dear Carolyn and Sylvia, who were always in touch with me, and they would call and say so-and-so is happening. I said, but I don't live in Collingwood, you know. And Collingwood is far, 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 far out there. So thank you very much also to Daniel for being my, Rob, my chauffeur to get me here today. So deeply appreciative. And I see so many friends, and the more I come, my network is extending. Dorothy from the Ontario Black Society was roots in the general area. I hear all the time about the good work that's happening. So congratulations to all. Keep up that great big cemetery work. I've seen it splashed across some article I was reading the other day. So you are making history here, and you are documenting your history. And so, Rob, I'm sure you'd agree with me that the congratulations to you, but also great kudos and thanks to all the people who are in this room. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
I'd just like to say on behalf of all of us, this is a little breath of spring on a wintry day. We thank you for always supporting everything we do, we'll phone Jean and say, "Are you busy? I'm having supper, but keep talking." You always take time for us. And you've opened so many doors you've gone through, but you've never failed to reach back and pull us through the door with you. You have also pointed us toward doors and with a hand on our back said, "Go forth." So we thank you for all the doors and for including us in your life.
Thank you so much. I'll let you hold it.
Yes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I know Sylvia is the devil behind us, right?
Carolyn.
Sylvia and Carolyn.
That's one time I'll correct the name. I'll set it right
Call her
here.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay.
Thanks, Sylvia. You're welcome.
We have some letters and well wishes for you, Robert. The Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery sends well wishes, and Terry Jackson will come forward and read that on behalf of Naomi.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to be here with all of you today. Hello over there. Hello, my friends. So I bring greetings today from Naomi Norquay. She is our professor, and she's also our president of the Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery in Priceville, Ontario. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us today and asked me if I would kindly bring greetings. Tribute to Rob Leverty, our advocate, and most important for me, our teacher, from the Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery. On behalf of the committee, I congratulate Rob on his promotion to the retreading department. That's the place we get to go after we quit our jobs. The place where we fit our vehicles with new tires, new treads, if you will. Rob has been a long-term, steadfast supporter of the cemetery and our committee. Before my time, he urged and supported the committee's application to become a charitable foundation. He welcomed the committee as an affiliate with the Ontario Historical Society. I got to know Rob as a fierce cemetery advocate. When we applied for Trillium funding for our permanent monument, we knew we had the Ontario Historical Society support through Rob's advice and, always, enthusiasm. He took the time to turn up at many of our cemetery committee's events, from meetings to decoration services. He always brought words of encouragement and expressed unfailing admiration for our ongoing work. He reminded us of the biggest context in which the Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery was an important piece. Our cemeteries and burial grounds house important stories and histories, whether they are still in use, historic, abandoned, or threatened by development. They need our constant vigilance and care. Rob kept this important duty always in our sight and encouraged us in our efforts. I can't quite imagine the Ontario Historical Society without Rob at the helm, but I do know that his good work has paved the path for him to feel able to retire, knowing he has left the organization in capable hands. So Rob, put on those new treads and enjoy the road ahead. Professor Naomi Norquay, the Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery Committee.
Oh yes, Carolyn, you overlooked a good friend. Dean Culver is here this afternoon. Dean, would you come forward, please, and bring greetings? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carolyn. I actually was called upon by Carolyn and Sylvia to introduce the Honorable Brian Saunderson, our MPP. He's obviously been called away somewhere, so my words mean absolutely nothing now because I have no one to introduce. Having said that, though, it's going to get weirder because I don't know Rob, and I don't know Rob's work. But here's what I do know. I do know that I'm so honored to be here, just to be among the presence of people in this room. Dr. Augustine's words Sylvia's words. Carolyn and Sylvia know that I would do anything that they asked me to do ever. And I can't help but think that all the things that have been said in the vibe that is filling this room has to be a reflection of you, Rob. For you to be honored in this way tells me something about the impact you've had in your role, in your work. And I want to say that I'm really honored just to be in this room with all of you. And I can't tell you how happy I am that Sylvia and Carolyn are a part of my life. They're mentors to me. One thing I was going to say when I was introducing Brian Saunderson was that I was grateful to him in the previous council that Yvonne Hamlin, our mayor-elect, was a part of, because they allowed me to go out and help facilitate the establishment of a group called the Unity Collective. And the Unity Collective, for those who don't know, is a group of diverse people in our community who bring a voice. It is one of the most rewarding things that I've ever gotten to be a part of in my career. And Sylvia and Carolyn are an incredible part of that. They remind us constantly of the human heritage. They remind us of the history that is represented by the humans in our community, and the history that we're making today, as Dr. Augustine said, the history that is ongoing right now. So without anyone to introduce, I'll just say thank you for having me. and obviously congratulations, Mr. Leverty. I really think that all that has been said about you is well earned, and I wish you really well in your retirement.
Thank you, Dean. The Ontario Black History Society, remarks from Dorothy Abbott, please. Thanks, Dorothy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dorothy Abbott with the Ontario Black History Society, and I'm bringing remarks to you from our president, Natasha Henry Dixon, who unfortunately could not be here today because she's in the midst of working on her dissertation, and she's behind the 8 ball, so she needs to get it done. So on behalf of the OBHS Board of Directors, I would like to extend our well wishes to Rob Leverty after serving with the OHS, including serving as an executive director for over 30 years. He has been a staunch advocate for preserving the heritage of Ontario, including the province's Black heritage, cemetery preservation, and other aspects of our rich, diverse past. He has always been there for us, providing guidance and support. Rob has helped to set provincial heritage standards and has continuously advocated for supports for organizations that do the community work they are passionate about. As he enters another stage of his life journey, we would like to wish Rob continued good health, wellness, and love. No doubt he will continue his advocacy. All the best to you, Rob, from Natasha Henry Dixon. And as I'm standing here, I'm also representing the Grey County Black Heritage Society, and I'm actually also representing another exhibit by a photographer about Black heritage called North is Freedom by Yuri Deutsch. And we all owe Rob a huge debt of gratitude for all the work that he has done over the years to make sure that our voices are heard. As Jean Augustine so eloquently put it, he has represented all of us. We all have a place in history that has been recognized, and it has gone down in the history books because of people like Rob Leverty, who have made certain that our voices have been heard. So Rob, on behalf of all the other organizations that I work with, a debt of gratitude. Thank you.
Well, I have 2 letters to read now. One letter is from the Penn Hills, and they asked me to read this to the congregation. Dear Rob, our mutual friend, the indomitable Carolyn Wilson, he added that, kindly offered to read the following during today's celebration. In our heart of hearts, we would much prefer being with you in person, but aging, as you will discover down the road, does have a way of thwarting one's best intentions. Your old friend Barry no longer drives, and though she still gets behind the wheel, Jane, a mere 84 years old, is currently hobbled with a pinched nerve. But life is good, and there is yet much to be done, including those increasingly important battles involving two of your biggest interests: heritage preservation and protection of our invaluable green spaces. In this regard, we march with you shoulder to shoulder. As a chronicler of the past, I go back to those years when oral history interests found me lugging a bulky tape recorder across the province. Back then, I would encounter in the most unlikely places your dear friend and mentor, the extraordinary Dorothy Duncan. We may never know how many miles Dorothy and yourself traveled, while individually serving as executive director of the Ontario Historical Society. But I think it's safe to say that when it comes to Ontario travels, you have by now outdone the two of us. Rob, you are to be commended on the many meaningful visits to Ontario communities that today benefit from their links to the OHS. The friendships made, and perhaps most especially those in off the beaten path places, will endure long past your retirement. But how can anyone who knows one Rob Leverty associate, you would retire? Retirement? Hardly. Personally, it seems appropriate to close with an example of the thoughtfulness your name quickly brings to mind. When our daughter Nancy passed away, your condolences were among the first received. Not forgotten are your words. They say it gets easier with time, but it doesn't, you wrote. It's just different. Rob, it won't be the same with you no longer at the helm at OHS, just different. And Jane joins in conveying warmest wishes to Annie and yourself. And kudos to Carolyn and Sylvia for organizing today's tribute. Barry and Jane Penfield, to you. And the last letter I'll read here, I believe here. Rob Leverty. As a member of the Ontario Historical Society since 2012, the Emancipation Festival organization has benefited greatly from your governance in preserving, interpreting, and publicizing so many crucial aspects of Ontario's heritage. We shall be forever thankful, particularly for the support you have given to the Black community, including the many opportunities to share important stories locally, nationally, and internationally. As a non-for-profit organization, we are grateful for all the assistance we receive from government, community organizations, businesses, individuals, and volunteers. Through sponsorships, donations, grants, and work, we can further our efforts with community and cultural organizations that recognize the Underground Railroad destination points with Owen Sound, the most northerly terminus. This support allows us to maintain our important work to preserve a 160-year legacy to honor Black ancestors in Canada's rich and diverse history. By connecting with individuals descended from slaves who traveled the path to freedom, we can continue to inform, educate, and preserve Black Canadian history and keep the picnic and other traditions alive for future generations. It has been and will continue to be an honor and a privilege to be a member of the Ontario Historical Society. We look forward to strengthening our relations within the community and helping each other to accomplish goals. You are so deserving of this special treatment of tribute that the Sheffield Park Black History Museum has organized in your honor. Our sincere thanks for your leadership as Executive Director of the OHS. Your valuable contributions have been integral to our success. Congratulations on all that you have accomplished. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors as you further explore your passion and dedication to environmental issues and spend quality time with your family. Take care. Hope our paths will cross again. Alison Turnbull, on behalf of the Emancipation Festival Board of Directors. Rob. And now it's my privilege to introduce Daniel DeShaw.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I'm here to say a few words on behalf of the OHS. That's a job that you'll all be more familiar with Rob doing, but as we all know, we're here to show appreciation for Rob and the incredible work he's done. And I'm here to be the sort of bring on the headliner in a few minutes. Now, I know Rob would rather focus on anything but himself. He'd prefer to get up here and talk about the contributions of others, specifically many of the people here today, but tough luck. We're gonna talk about you and the great work that you've done over the years. And that's really at the heart of what makes Rob so admirable and what's made him an incredible executive director. He's very selfless and a very caring person. During his time at the OHS, he's focused on sticking up for what's right for our members, but more importantly, the people of Ontario in general. Now, the OHS is here to speak on behalf of the public interest, as Rob has often reminded me, and that means we work for the benefit of the greater good in our society. And that's often at odds with the desires or aspirations of financially or politically motivated individuals. And when a piece of a community's heritage is threatened, be it a cemetery, a historic church like the one we're in today, or a museum space, the community needs a voice. And Rob has done an incredible job, not just of being that voice at the highest levels, but by helping to amplify the voices of the people who really need to be listened to. Now, 34 years is a long time that you've been with the OHS. It's actually a kind of an interesting story that I learned as I was researching your work with the OHS and going back those 34 years, that turns out I was born just a few weeks away from the day that you started at the OHS. And actually our offices are visible from the house that I grew up in. So it's an interesting way to bring that full circle here today. I think committing oneself to a cause for that long, let alone one organization, is impressive, and it really does make a difference. It makes a difference because you have someone who understands the organization, who knows the history, and the mistakes that have been made, and what's worked and what doesn't, and all of the important relationships that make our work possible. It's also important because it reassures the people who look to the OHS for support that we are led by someone who not only knows what he's doing, but genuinely cares that it gets done. And Rob also has a steel trap of a memory. Over the years, he's asked me to pull so many different articles from our bulletin or our annual reports, our newsletters. And he's used that ability to remember the needs and experiences of our members going back so many years. Rob will often come to me and ask me to pull an article from 1998, and he knows exactly what month it was written in and what bulletin it was in, and I edit the bulletin and I have trouble remembering what we wrote last time. So, I think, in fact, Rob actually asked me to pull an article for his remarks today, an article that he wrote in spring of 2008. And he remembers exactly when that was and what it was about and everything that he said, and I think that speaks volumes. I think it's because he really remembers the stories that are important to our members, who are also our friends. Rob has done so much for the OHS in those 34 years with the organization. I could say so many things about his work, but my speech got shorter with every person who came up here and said what they had to say about Rob. I think it would be a major research project to go through and report on everything impressive that Rob's done in his time at the OHS, but I want to focus specifically on his behind-the-scenes work with our members and his work on incorporation. Since becoming executive director in 2008, Rob has incorporated 121 unique historical organizations from across the province. I think that's pretty impressive. Now, Rob, actually, we constantly work on putting together lists of our affiliate members and the people that we've incorporated, and this many years or since COVID and going back. So I have the pleasure of looking back even further and going back to spring 2008 when you started doing that job. And now, every time we incorporate a new group, Rob is physically in that community, listening to concerns, guiding the volunteers, the citizens, helping them navigate what are typically very complex political issues. And I know many of the people I see in this room have either founded or worked with a historical society or an organization in this province, and you've probably worked very closely with Rob. And so you'll know just how much time, energy, and genuine concern goes into that work and comes out of Rob every time he's in the community and helping you. So if there's anyone that can understand the significance of that number, 121 organizations, I think it's the people here. Now, the number of groups incorporating every year has been much higher under Rob, and it continues to go up. The people with cultural ownership over the places where the citizens have to step up and fight for that asset, to have it remembered or to keep it standing, those people need a voice. And though our funding has been frozen for nearly 25 years, Rob has continued to do more with less and kept our important work going. Under his leadership, the Society has gone from being in significant debt to sitting on impressive reserve funds, ensuring that we will not be bullied off any important issue to our members, stakeholders, and the public in general. I know that I'm not alone in thinking that it's hard to imagine the OHS without Rob. I've worked with him for going on 8 years, and I've learned a great deal from him, as have so many other people. But whoever takes over for the OHS as the ED will have big shoes to fill, but a solid foundation to stand on, and we have Rob to thank for that. Now, I have something I want to present to Rob. I know he's usually up here presenting these himself, but Rob, I'm going to introduce you, so why don't you come up here and join me? I'll read this plaque for everyone here, and then I'll introduce Rob and pass it over to him. So Rob, this is in appreciation of 34 years to the Ontario Historical Society, leading the historic organization with passion, wisdom, and enthusiasm for more than 14 years. Thank you, Rob, for your selfless and unparalleled dedication to the Society, its members, subscribers, staff, and all the diverse peoples of Ontario. Through your guidance and leadership, people from all across the province have been empowered to preserve and promote the history most important to them and their communities. Your legacy will continue to inspire our work for many years to come. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to introduce Rob Leverty, Executive Director.
Well, I've never been in this kind of a position before. And I am deeply humbled, and I can't think of a better place to be. I'm not supposed to have favorites. We have 530 organizations, but this is home. Thank you very much for organizing this. I went downstairs and thought of all the workshops we had there.
Yes.
And how the times we had snowstorms, we couldn't even get home. So thank you, Sylvia. Carolyn, Mayor-elect, Honorable Jean Augustine, all the groups here today. My partner Annie couldn't be here. She's working in Europe at the present moment. But I'm very thrilled that my son Jonathan can be here. So I'm very thrilled. And I'd also like to thank Daniel, my colleague Daniel, very much. It's been a great honor to work with Daniel for the last 8 years. God, 8 years? Gee, I could be your father, I'm sure. I was gonna say grandfather. I just became a grandfather, so there's been so many great things said today, and I'm not going to be long, but dear friends over there, old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee members, asked me if maybe I'd start at the beginning. You know, how long have I been here? So I picked a story for you. In 1988, I was hired by the Ontario Historical Society to develop a grant program. The government of Ontario gave us $1 million. Can you imagine? We were able to give money out. So I designed a program called the History of Ontario's Peoples Program, about inclusion, telling their stories, their contributions to our history. And we could only fund 1 out of 10 applications, but we had a peer-reviewed committee. So nobody from the government was on the committee. We had representations from the First Nations, the Black history, all the different cultural groups that we bring together, and they would mark and award the applications. And so, of course, the government didn't like this, and because they weren't giving out the money, and of course the civil servants would first phone, and they said, well, we don't like who you're choosing. And then the political staff would call for the minister's office and say, no, you got to change that grant. Well, no, we don't, because a peer-reviewed committee, non-government, has awarded these projects. So one of them was Carolyn DeCoco, who's just retired as our past president. And she phoned one day in 1989 and said that she'd like to do the history of Italians in Sarnia. And I must admit, I didn't know there were that many Italians in Sarnia. But anyways, she wanted to do a book and a slideshow. So she was awarded a grant. And in 1991, I was invited down to give the check. She was going to have a gala launching the book. And I said, how many people do you have coming there? And she said, about 450. I said, oh my goodness. So I could deliver the check and at the gala. So I agreed I'd come down Friday to Sarnia. And she said, don't worry, I booked your hotel room. I'll pay the room. And so I got to Sarnia and I got booked into the hotel. And the staff told me I had the best room in the hotel. And then soon after, flowers arrived. And I was kind of tired. I wanted to get down and have a little rest. And I like naps in the afternoon. Another knock on the door, would I like my suit cleaned? Well, actually, I didn't even own a suit at that time. And then another knock on the door, a cheese plate arrived. And then 4 o'clock, about the barber's ready, would you like a haircut and a shave? And I said, no, I don't need that. And about 5 o'clock, a trolley came in with like a whole bar. They were expecting that I was having some guests for drinks. So that next morning, I went to the restaurant and the staff greeted me, took me to the special table. I said, no, I wanted to sit over at the window. And so they all followed me over. And one of the staff gave me my napkin, and he said, Your Excellency, would you like a special breakfast? And I only heard Your Excellency. I said, of course I'll have the special breakfast. So all these platters arrive, and then finally the maitre d' in a tuxedo arrives, and this is 7:30 in the morning. And he leans down and he whispers, my staff and our hotel are deeply honored to have the Italian ambassador to Canada staying with us. So we have had some fun over the years. And I tell you, I did that night meet the Italian ambassador. And he was wondering if he could stay with me. He also said, you know, in Rome, and I've learned in Sarnia, Mr. Leverty, that the man with the money, he's the most important person. But I wanted, thinking coming here, how did we all get here? We took different paths, different experiences. And so I want to share one with you that is personal, and I think maybe explains why I'm here with you. My grandmother had an island 35 miles west of Parry Sound. She was a real pioneer. And so there was no electricity, about an hour and a half by boat out there. And she got arthritis. And when I was 10 years old, she said to my mother, if Robert can swim, he can come with me in the summer and look after the cottage. So I was a very lucky guy. I got to, do all sorts of work, lots of responsibilities. But the most important thing was, near me, was Parry Island First Nation, now the Waxahachie First Nation. And at 10, I developed a friendship with a Hubert Tabobandum. And Hubert was about 3 years older than me. And he taught me how to hunt and fish. I mean, hunting, mostly we saw mosquitoes and rattlesnakes. But, when I got to 14 and he was about 17, my grandmother said, you can go into Parry Sound. We only would go in once in the summer. And Hubert could drive, and we could get a list of groceries. We needed lumber and things. So we went in. And so I said to Hubert, there's this great butcher, and I think that maybe you could get your supplies there. So we went in, and Hubert, it was the most prominent family in Parry Sound. And I got diverted, and then I ordered my hamburger and sausages. And so I went out, when I went out, I asked Hubert, I said, where's your meat? And I learned a lot about nonverbal communication then. I could see he was upset, humiliated. And I said, Hubert, where's your meat? And he said, well, they wouldn't serve me. So I went in, and the butcher was very tall. And so, if you remember the meat in those days, they were wrapped in the pink paper, and then there was another little lighter brown tape. So my right hand was the hamburger, and I asked, well, why wouldn't you serve my friend? And he said, well, it's none of your business. And I said, I can't remember what I said, but I was pretty upset. So all I remember was the hamburger going past him and hitting the wall. But I'm left-handed, so I had the sausages, and I didn't miss. And when I went out, Hubert saw this, and he said, we need to leave town now. And on the way back out in the Parry Sound, he was running the boat. He stopped the boat, and he said, what are you going to tell your grandmother? And I said, well, when I tell her something, you've got to be with me. which goes to allies. And it was, you know, when you get older, you look back, and this was a seminal moment. And so you've all come here in different paths. You've had much easier roads to travel. You've had much more difficult roads to travel than me. Racism, anti-discrimination, discrimination. I know some of the challenges and obstacles you've had. And I could never fill your soul with shoes. But it's been an honor to travel with you. And I'm so honored that you have invited me to help out in some of your battles. And I think of Howard, Sheffield, and I wrote about him when I became ED because I remember in 1998 at a farmhouse west of Flesherton where we held the meeting on incorporation. And it took, 5 or 6 hours. It was the longest meeting ever of the 121. But I knew at the time that we had to build trust. And there were obvious reasons why you wouldn't trust a guy like me who, can do this in corporation. It takes a long time to build trust and build bridges. And I'm deeply honored, and to me, this is the day to celebrate you and what you've done and the bridges you've built. And you should be so incredibly, the obstacles you've overcome and the challenges, and quite frankly, the racism and discrimination you faced. And I'm so deeply, this is the most meaningful tribute that I could have, but really, I feel it's your tribute. We're here to celebrate your successes and your accomplishments. I know that with things like Hubert, I never could feel that, how humiliating he was. And I know some of the difficult things you've gone through and how you've trusted me off the record of the challenges you faced. And so this is a celebration today, as far as I'm concerned, about your accomplishments and a tribute to all of you. The boards, the members. And it's a great honor to celebrate with you. The struggles are never over. 10 days ago, the Ontario government announced that there would be a new Bill 23, and the Ontario Heritage Act was going to be in the bill, and it's significantly weakened. There's no doubt about that. And so I set aside immediately time to speak, maybe this Wednesday or Thursday. There might be about 5 minutes to talk. So my colleagues have been helping me. I'm writing a submission to the province about Bill 23. And I'd like to finish giving you what I'm thinking about saying next Wednesday or Thursday if I'm given the opportunity. So, good afternoon, members of the Legislative Assembly. The Ontario Historical Society was created 134 years ago in 1888 by 8 local historical societies. We have 130 member organizations across the province now. The legislature gave us in 1899 the power to incorporate not-for-profit organizations, and we're the only one in the province of Ontario, in the world, that can do this for historical organizations. Just this last few months, we've incorporated a new historical society at Elliott Lake, a new Lanark County Arts and Heritage Organization, and on November the 4th, the Schumacher Historical Society, just east of Timmins. So we're here today to speak about our membership. In 1927, the Ontario Historical Society came to the Legislative Assembly to advocate for a new Cemeteries Act. We accomplished that, but we were very unhappy with the act. So in 1932, we lobbied and got a stronger act. I came here in 1990 when you, to a committee like this today, who proposed a new Cemeteries Act. There was no heritage component in that act. It was written by and for the real estate industry. We pushed back. The Ministry of Culture came and testified that no, everything was fine, but we would be given a chance to make amendments. That promise was never kept. We pushed back again with the next government, and the government of Ontario under the NDP did give us some victories. The Act stated that you could dig up and move a cemetery in this province if it was in the public interest. But they refused to define the public interest. And the current legislation says that the registrar for cemeteries is God. He can make the decision himself. So we advocated that the Premier's office called me and they said, we can offer you this. We know you're not going to be happy, but we can offer you this. We can give you a right of appeal. And so we talked about that, and I said, well, the government of Ontario should give us the notification for appealing. And the province said, well, no, it'll have to be the owner. But we wanted that notification if somebody wants to dig up and move a cemetery so that we could tell you, our members. So we did get in the act. We got the right to make a submission. And we got the key thing is the right to appeal the province's decision. So, 2 years later, 1995, here we go. The registrar orders the cemetery of Markham, because there's all kinds of housing being built, just like now. And he orders the cemetery to be dug up and moved for condominium development. Now, we didn't get notification, so he broke the law right there. But we did appeal. And it was the first time in the history of the province. What is the public interest? Well, the hearing went on from November 1995 to July 1997. The one side was the province of Ontario, the town of Markham, and the developer. The key thing was that one Friday afternoon, the province argued that there were no important people buried in this cemetery. There were no politicians. There were no great military leaders. In other words, no white guys like me. And I think that was the key moment when we put in the evidence and had to develop the evidence that everybody's history is important. And it's our membership that drives us. We're a democratic organization. So it took 19 months to write the decision. And the tribunal ruled that we represented the public interest. I might add that even the Attorney General's office tried to prevent the descendants from coming and testifying. They said it was irrelevant. And we argued, of course, that, well, excuse me, it's a public hearing on the public interest and you don't want the descendants to testify? Rubbish, nonsense. So very soon after that, we had many other cases, but I think in the history of this, the deterrent has been the most important issue. In 2006, we discovered something called unregistered cemeteries. And in 2009, we got a private member's bill into the legislature, and you came, Carolyn, that day, and we had all party support that it was not in the public interest to dig up and move inactive cemeteries. Great speeches by all the parties who supported us, but unfortunately the legislation did not pass because Parliament was prorogued and everything died. But by then we discovered there were a lot of more unknown cemeteries in this province. And I met the Minister of Government Services in 2011 and said, we have registered cemeteries where we have the right of appeal, right of notification, right to make a submission. But we have a growing number of unregistered cemeteries where they can be dug up and moved and we won't even know about it. Now he was good. We insisted there be no civil servants in the room. It was just a couple of us and the minister. And he was a lawyer from Kingston, Mr. Garrettson, and he said, you know, there's an issue of equality here in terms of the Constitution, and there's an issue of fairness. So I'd like the Ontario Historical Society to go away and document all the unregistered cemeteries in the province of Ontario. So as a public service, we've been doing that. Well, 11 years later, last Wednesday, we completed that. We had two of the finest genealogists in the country. And we scanned it Friday, and it's going to be our submission. Of course, all the peoples of Ontario are buried in these cemeteries, all across the province. There's First Nations burials, there's Black History cemeteries that are not registered in Haldimand County, there's Jewish cemeteries, there's the cemeteries of all the peoples of Ontario. These are people who were forgotten, neglected, ignored, or not important. And so we're going to send you all, our members here today, our submission. I hope I'll be able to make a verbal one, but our conclusion is this. We're not against affordable housing, but we are against you putting those houses on the graves of our ancestors. And so we're going to ask the committee to vote. All the parties, we'd like to see it, how you vote, that we would like you to register these unregistered, there's 1,600 of them we've come up with. Because we believe that's in the public interest. And we'd like the committee to also vote to recommend to the Government of Ontario that all the cemeteries in the province be designated for their historical significance, so that we win this battle. My friends, though, we're going to need you to help us on this battle again. As you know, it's never over. It's a constant struggle. And all I can finish with saying is that even as a private citizen, on this issue, on issues of racism, fighting discrimination, and working for social justice, I'm hoping you invite me to help you out. And it's a great honor to be with you today. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
This is Rob and his family. It's his son. Thank you, Rob. It's for you right here.
Thank you very much. Safe trip home.
Thank you, Rob. We appreciate this very much. We have a table here. We put maybe some cards inside. You have some presentations you want to do.
Yeah, there's books outside. Please take. Help yourselves. Enjoy. Yes, and we had for,
Thank you, everyone.
the-
Rob's gonna finish off here. He has some things to
for the land acknowledgement. Thank you very much.
Brian Charles. And thank you all for coming this afternoon and to have some time to say hello to Rob if you like. We appreciate this very much. And to all our guests, supporters, and helpers, well done. Thank you.
Anytime.